Mark, are you really leaving for the entire weekend to go to Brenda Peterson's lake house? Claire asked, unable to hide her disappointment. Her husband had only told her his plans the night before, and Claire had been so hopeful they would spend the weekend together. She had even looked up movie times, hoping to persuade Mark to go to the cinema. It had been so long since they'd been anywhere, and she deeply missed that kind of relaxation. In the past, Mark had always been the one to organize everything, loving to surprise his wife. He would either book a table at a nice restaurant or get tickets to a play, remembering how much Claire loved the theater. In her youth, Claire had been in an acting workshop herself and had carefully nurtured dreams of the big stage. But Claire's parents, especially her father, considered her passion a mere hobby. Her dad would gladly attend all of Claire's performances and was even proud of her success. But the idea of his daughter making it her profession was out of the question. Claire still remembered the conversation with her father that had broken her heart, forcing her to see her once-beloved dad in a new light. "Claire, I'm your father, and I'm responsible for your future," her dad had said didactically, pacing the room. "I'm an adult now and have the right to decide how I live my life," Claire had tried to argue. But her father gave her one of those looks that made arguing pointless and said, "I truly hope my daughter is smart enough to understand how difficult it is to get by in this world without support. You're going to need my help more than once. Don't disappoint me, honey. I've already put a lot of effort into figuring this out. You'll enroll in the business school, and after graduation, you'll work at your Uncle Steve's firm. It's a great start and your ticket to a comfortable life. And believe me, I'm doing this because I love you." "Out of love," Claire had cried. "You call this love? Forcing me to do something I hate more than anything? All your numbers and financial reports are not for me. I love the theater. Why can't you understand? I've already said my piece, and I'm not going to repeat myself," her father said, his voice deliberately calm in contrast to his daughter's tone. "If I didn't love you, I wouldn't care what awaits you in your theater life. And keep in mind, if you decide to do things your way, I'll do everything in my power to make sure you fail. You know that when I want something, I get it. This way, no one is stopping you from continuing with your workshop while choosing a real profession." "You can't do this to me," Claire sobbed. "In time, you'll understand I'm doing the right thing," her father said with a sigh and left the room. Claire cried all evening and, in the end, decided to run away from home. But the next day, she got scared of her own decision and submitted to her father's will. Now, more than 10 years later, Claire knew for a fact that her father, as always, had been right, though she had never once admitted it to him. But deep down, Claire was grateful to her dad for the life she now had. Few of her acquaintances could boast the same professional success as Claire. She wasn't even 30 when she became the head of the finance department for an entire division. Her salary was commensurate, and it was hard for Claire to even imagine a different life. For example, the life of the girls she used to be in the workshop with. None of them had achieved any significant results or become famous actresses. Most of those who did manage to get into acting schools had long since abandoned the profession. Some were still connected to the arts in some way, but they spent their talent performing at various corporate events and parties. Only one girl, Marina, now worked in a children's theater, earning peanuts for playing minor roles. All in all, Claire was glad her father had insisted on his way back then. Claire had also met her future husband thanks to that choice. Mark had attended the same university as Claire, just 2 years ahead of her. Meeting him had helped Claire accept everything else. Mark helped her a lot with her studies and even instilled in her a certain appreciation for the exact sciences. Claire's parents were pleased with their daughter's choice, and after graduating, Claire married Mark. "Claire, I told you. Mom asked me to help consult with the contractors who are rebuilding the porch at the lake house. There's still a lot of work to do, and the crew won't finish in one day," Mark said that Saturday morning, answering his wife's question. "I see," Claire sighed, trying to resign herself to spending the weekend alone. She had previously offered to go to the lake house with him, even though she didn't enjoy spending long periods with her mother-in-law, whom she found too arrogant and proud of her family's roots. But Mark had said there was no room for her while the construction was ongoing. Kissing his wife on the cheek, Mark walked out the door. Claire sadly went to the window and watched as her husband got into his car and drove out of the yard. Then she walked through the apartment, picking up things her husband loved to leave wherever was convenient, and entered the bedroom. Looking at the unmade bed, Claire thought, why not just lounge around for a couple of hours? I have 2 whole free days ahead of me. Suddenly, a phone vibrated under the pillow. Claire glanced at the nightstand and confirmed that her device was there. The sound was coming from Mark's phone. Smiling, Claire shook her head. Calling her husband a scatterbrain under her breath, she pulled the phone from under the pillow. It was one of Mark's friends calling. The screen displayed the name, Chris Miller, 2. For a few seconds, Claire wondered whether to answer the call. In that time, the caller hung up. Then, she decided to text Chris and let him know that Mark had forgotten his phone at home. The decision was spontaneous. Claire had never been in the habit of snooping through her husband's phone. Opening the message thread with the person who had just tried to call her husband, Claire saw that the last message to Chris Miller had been sent by Mark that very morning. There was nothing surprising about that, but the text of the message made Claire tremble. I've made my decision, so I'm staying at your place tonight, Mark had written. It wasn't easy, so I'm hoping for some compensation. A string of emojis followed, and then, and wear that little black thing, like last time. Claire sat on the edge of the bed and reread the message several times. She desperately wanted it all to be a dream. Suddenly, through the slightly open bedroom window, Claire heard a car pull up to the building. Shoving the phone back under the pillow, she hurried to hide behind the bathroom door. If Mark came back for his phone and saw her, he would know immediately. Claire turned the water on full blast and waited. A moment later, the front door clicked open. She could hear Mark pause at the threshold and then walk quickly into the apartment. Returning to the hallway, he knocked on the bathroom door and shouted, "Claire, I forgot my phone, but I'm leaving now. Bye." When the door closed behind Mark, Claire got into the shower. She wanted to wash away an invisible filth that seemed to be crawling into her very soul. That entire evening, Claire either burst into tears, remembering the lines of the message clearly not addressed to Chris Miller but to some woman, or tried to understand how this could have happened to her. She had always considered herself the kind of woman husbands don't leave for mistresses. It was always Mark who was jealous of her, and his jealousy was partially justified. Many men noticed Claire. If she had only wanted to, she could have had countless affairs. But Claire never even allowed herself to flirt with other men. She considered herself above it and valued her family's reputation just as much as her professional prestige. Claire didn't sleep a wink that night. She kept thinking about what to do. Most of all, she wanted to cause a huge scene, with breaking dishes and all the rest, and then, of course, walk out with her head held high or send the cheater packing. But Claire was terribly curious about the woman who had become her rival. And more than that, Claire simply had to punish her husband for his betrayal, and not just by showing her pain, but in a real way, so that he too would feel everything she was feeling now. The next morning, a slightly crazy plan formed in Claire's mind. She decided to pretend that nothing had happened and that she was still unaware of Mark's affair. She was a little scared about whether she could control her own emotions when she saw her husband. But Claire hadn't spent all those years in an acting workshop for nothing. Mark returned on Sunday evening, his whole demeanor showing incredible fatigue. "Claire, listen, promise me we'll never own a lake house," he said jokingly, sitting down at the table. Claire had spent Sunday by the stove, cooking all of Mark's favorite things. "I see my lovely wife missed me so much, she cooked up a feast." Mark smiled and attacked the food as if he hadn't eaten in 2 days. "Of course, I missed you," Claire said, and even kissed her husband on his unshaven cheek. The touch made Claire feel a little sick, but she quickly composed herself. Fortunately, her husband was so tired that evening that he was snoring almost as soon as his head hit the pillow. To begin, on Monday morning, Claire gave the security guard at the entrance an inviting smile. He had been eyeing her for a long time, and she decided to test on him whether she was capable of something like this. It turned out not to be so difficult. The guard, named Will, was a bit stunned at first, then beamed like a kid on Christmas and began showering Claire with compliments. "Miss Ashton, you look absolutely stunning today. Had a good weekend?" "Just wonderful, Will," Claire said, glancing at the ID badge pinned to the guard's chest just in case. Confirming she hadn't gotten the name wrong, Claire smiled broadly again and winked at the man, who was now completely floored by her attention. That same day, Claire tested her charm on a couple of other male colleagues in whose eyes she had often noticed admiration for her. Having secured this advantage, she decided it was time to go after bigger fish. Not long ago, a new director had been appointed to lead their division. The man was a bit older than Claire, and he was also a widower. Michael Vance had never shown any behavior toward his chief economist that could be interpreted as a desire to start an office romance. On the contrary, he was extremely reserved in showing any emotions, but Claire decided that if she was going to soothe her wounded pride, it might as well be with the help of a worthy man. Besides, as a person and as a man, Michael Vance appealed to her. Naturally, if not for the circumstances, Claire would never have entertained the thought of trying to attract him, but now it was vital for her to make her boss show interest in her. What would follow? Claire didn't think about at that moment. The dull ache that had settled in her chest after her husband's betrayal didn't allow her to think clearly. Choosing her moment, Claire entered the director's office to get some papers signed and discuss current matters. There, sitting across from him, Claire kept rubbing her eyes and sighing heavily. "Is something wrong?" Michael Vance finally asked. Claire's expression was so mournful it was impossible not to notice. "Yes, problems at home," Claire admitted. "What kind of problems?" her new boss asked with concern. "I can't talk about it. It's too personal," Claire replied and, unable to hold back, burst into tears. She didn't have to force it. The mere memory of Mark's infidelity brought tears to her eyes, so her outburst was entirely genuine, and Michael Vance, like a true gentleman, couldn't help but show compassion. A few minutes later, Claire was crying on her director's shoulder, repeating the same phrase over and over. "I don't understand how he could do this to me." Claire had rightly judged that the truth would not only seem more credible, but would also be a far more effective way of attracting Michael Vance's attention. And she was right. The boss was completely flustered by the sight of a weeping woman, especially considering that Miss Ashton was usually a model of icy composure. That same evening, toward the end of the workday, Michael Vance, passing by the finance department, glanced into her office and asked Claire how she was doing. "Everything's fine, thank you," Claire replied in her usual businesslike tone and, with a charming smile, added, "Just trying to call a cab. I couldn't get my car started this morning. Troubles, as they say, come in bunches." "Oh, really? Let me give you a ride," the boss immediately offered. When Michael Vance drove Claire, she asked him to drop her off near the next building over. The woman had calculated everything perfectly, remembering that her husband had recently started parking his car in that exact lot. "Thank you, Michael," Claire said, saying goodbye to her director. "And I'm sorry for the hysterics this morning. It's not like me to show my feelings in public. I don't know what came over me." "It's all right, Claire. Sometimes our weaknesses are stronger than we are. I'll tell you this. It's better to let out your inner feelings sometimes than to keep that storm inside. That can be dangerous." The boss gave Claire an encouraging smile. "Well, that's good to know. If I ever need to vent again, I know where to go." Claire laughed cheerfully and got out of the car. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Mark's car pull into the parking lot and walk toward her building with a light step. As Claire had calculated, the moment she walked into the apartment, Mark asked, "Who was that dropping you off?" When Claire feigned a little fright, he continued, "I just saw you getting out of a black SUV. "Oh, that was our new director. My car wouldn't start this morning, so he offered me a ride." Claire's cheeks turned a natural shade of red. It was very unusual for her to be evasive with her husband, and she even felt a pang of guilt. Of course, the feeling quickly passed as soon as she remembered the reasons that had prompted her to do this. The next morning, as Claire and Mark were having breakfast in the kitchen, Claire's phone suddenly rang. Seeing that it was Michael Vance calling, Claire was genuinely surprised and pleased at the same time. Answering the call, Claire got up from the table and went into the bathroom. "Claire, I wanted to ask if you need a ride to work. I drive past your area anyway, so don't hesitate," Michael Vance said into the phone after greeting her. The director's concern for her came at the perfect time. When Claire returned from the bathroom, her husband was glaring at her. "Who was that?" he asked sullenly. Claire shrugged. "Michael." She paused briefly before continuing. "Vance. He offered to give me a ride to work, but I told him I'm hoping my car starts today, so I'll manage on my own. If your car doesn't start, I'll drive you myself. Look at him. What a good Samaritan." Mark grumbled under his breath for a while, but Claire was no longer listening. The first act had been played. It was time to move on to the main part of the performance. The corporate holiday party, celebrating the company's founding anniversary, was approaching, and Claire was counting on this event. The company's management had informed employees in advance that the celebration would take place out of town. An entire country club resort had been booked for this purpose. "I don't get it. You're going there overnight?" Mark asked indignantly when his wife reminded him that she would be away for the upcoming weekend. "Well, of course. Overnight. How else?" Claire replied, feigning surprise. "And that? What's his name? Michael Vance will be there too?" Claire gave her husband a quick glance and said, "I think it's perfectly natural for the head of the division to be present at the corporate party." Her husband said nothing more on the matter. He was just in a bad mood all evening, and on Saturday morning, the day of the corporate party, Mark got up with his wife and watched her get ready. "Isn't that outfit a bit too fancy for a country getaway?" he asked, seeing Claire pack a short evening dress into her bag. "There's a banquet at the restaurant in the evening." "I can't show up in a tracksuit," Claire retorted. She deliberately spent a long time in front of the mirror, doing her makeup and hair, and then, glancing at the clock, said, "Oh, I think I'm running late. Doesn't your event start at 2? You said so, didn't you?" "Yes, but I still need to get there," and so on. "The drive will take no more than an hour, and it's not even 11 yet." "Really?" Claire said, looking at her husband distractedly. "Well, maybe I'll stop somewhere on the way for a bite? I barely ate breakfast. I didn't have much of an appetite today." "They'll feed you at the banquet," Mark said angrily, and went into the bedroom. Claire gave him a condescending smile and slipped out the door. As soon as she drove away from the house, she parked her car near a grocery store. Taking her phone from her purse, Claire dialed a number and spoke into the receiver. "Michael, I'm sorry to bother you. I wanted to leave early, not trusting my suddenly temperamental car. And you know what? It died on me, not even a quarter mile from my house. Are you by any chance driving past my neighborhood? I can wait as long as you need." "Claire, don't worry. I'll pick you up now. I left early too. I was planning to stop somewhere for a coffee. If you don't mind having breakfast with me at some roadside diner, you're welcome to join." "With pleasure. I love roadside diners," Claire replied quickly. 10 minutes later, Claire was sitting in a car that smelled of leather and a subtle hint of men's cologne. Today, Michael Vance was dressed in simple gray jeans and a beige hoodie. His casual look was disarmingly calming, and Claire soon forgot why she was there. They were mostly silent on the way, listening to pleasant music and occasionally exchanging meaningless phrases. Claire had a strange feeling, as if all this had already happened in her life. Not in reality, or else Claire would have remembered, but perhaps in some long-forgotten dream. "Should we stop here?" the man asked. Claire looked at the sign of the roadside diner, which read, "The Contented Cat." "Funny name," Claire smiled. "I hope they serve pancakes with sour cream." "Why specifically pancakes with sour cream?" "Well, you know, cats love cream, and for some reason, I'm desperately craving pancakes." There were no pancakes at that diner, but they did have cheesecake with a side of cream. "All right, I won't be picky," Claire said, placing her order. When they sat down at a small table in the corner, Michael Vance, after taking a sip of coffee, confessed, "By the way, do you know what I'm best at cooking?" "What?" Claire asked with a smile. "Pancakes. I rarely make them now, but when my wife was alive, I often treated her to my cooking. I can't imagine you in the kitchen with a frying pan. And you'd be wrong. If I had my way, I'd never leave the stove. It's just silly to cook for oneself, and I don't have guests over very often. My brother and his family live in another state, and when they visit, I go all out. My brother has 4 kids, by the way." "Wow. A big family has always seemed like a symbol of harmony and coziness to me. I was an only child, and my husband is too, so we don't have many relatives." talking about her husband, Claire abruptly fell silent. The feeling of lightness that had accompanied her the whole way vanished, and the woman remembered why she had started all this. These thoughts made Claire's heart so heavy that she wanted to confess to the man sitting across from her, right then and there. She tried not to think about what would happen after she carried out her vengeful plans. Her life would never be the same anyway. One could say her old, familiar life ended the moment she read that message. Well, shall we get going? Claire heard Michael Vance's question and nodded in agreement. For the rest of the journey, Claire tried to suppress the pangs of her suddenly awakened conscience. Yes, the new director turned out to be even better than she had thought. The image of Michael Vance in a kitchen apron, making pancakes for his nephews and nieces, was stuck in her mind. But she couldn't change her plans. The dull ache in her chest craved retribution. And it so happened that Michael Vance was her main tool in this endeavor. The corporate party was in full swing. Claire tried not to follow Michael Vance around too obviously in front of everyone. She only invited him to dance once, and occasionally stopped by him to exchange a few words. But as the evening began to draw to a close, Claire decided to act. She downed half a glass of sparkling wine in one go and headed toward her boss. Passing by him, she swayed a little and, to keep from falling, grabbed his sleeve. "Oh, I'm sorry. I think I overdid it with the drinks," Claire whispered. "I probably need some fresh air." "Do you need help?" the man asked with concern. "Yes, please, I'm so embarrassed, excuse me." "It's all right, let's go. I could use some fresh air myself." Claire and her boss went outside. "It's still so noisy here. Maybe we could walk down to the river?" Claire asked. "All right, let's." Michael Vance took Claire by the arm, and they headed away from the hotel. When darkness enveloped them, Claire stopped and, moving closer to Michael Vance, wrapped her arms around his neck. His scent actually made her head spin. Or maybe it was the champagne. Claire didn't know. "Claire, are you trying to use me to punish your husband?" her boss suddenly said. Claire pulled back from him and froze, unable to look away from his face. "What makes you say that?" she stammered. "Oh, come on. I was married for 15 years. I know all the female tricks. Not that I ever cheated on my wife, I loved her too much for that. But my Amelia just enjoyed making me jealous." "I'm sorry, Michael," Claire whispered. "Let's just use first names. I think it'll be easier." "Okay," Claire nodded obediently. After that, without a word, they followed a path and soon, indeed, reached the river. Stopping at the bank, they both remained silent for a while. "Can I ask something?" Claire said cautiously. "You want to know about my wife?" "Yes." "What did she die from?" "Amelia was sick for a long time. We fought for her life for almost 7 years, but we couldn't beat the cancer. It was excruciatingly painful to watch her slowly fade away. But when she was gone, the worst part began. Life without her seemed impossible." "Claire, what are you going to do now with this whole situation?" Michael asked, suddenly changing the subject. Claire lowered her eyes. "I don't know. More than anything, I wanted revenge, to make him hurt as much as I was hurting. Please, forgive me. Stop apologizing and listen. Revenge, of course, sometimes brings relief, but only temporarily. And then it gets even worse. You feel such an emptiness inside that you can't get rid of for a long time. I know what I'm talking about. I once tried to get revenge on a former business partner. The best thing for you to do is to make an effort and decide for yourself how to handle this situation." "What do you mean?" "You don't have many options. Either try to forgive your husband, or, if you're not ready to accept what you've learned about him, leave him and try to build a new life. Of course, in either case, I would advise you to talk to him first. I think you're discerning enough to tell if your husband decides to lie to you, coming up with some excuse. Besides, who knows? Maybe there really was some mistake. In any case, it would be much better for you to clear things up and get closure." "You're right, of course. I don't even know why I started all this. The betrayal hurt so much, I couldn't think of anything else. Yeah, life sometimes throws these surprises at us. But you're strong. You'll get through this." Ivan placed a hand on Claire's shoulder and gave her a reassuring hug. The woman looked at him with gratitude and nodded. "I'll try," she said in a firm voice. The next day, Michael Vance drove Claire right to her apartment building's entrance. Claire was done playing hide-and-seek. She intended to talk to her husband that very day, and then act according to the circumstances. As soon as Claire entered the apartment, she felt an icy chill. Mark came out of the bedroom and looked at her with open contempt. "Did you have fun?" he said, as if spitting the words in her direction. "What are you talking about?" Claire frowned. "You don't know what I'm talking about? Your little adventure, of course. Did you think your antics would go unnoticed? You could have at least parked your car further from the house. Or do you take me for a complete idiot? It's understandable. Compared to your boss, I probably don't seem like a promising option anymore. Wanted to climb higher, huh? Well, answer me." Mark raised his voice, and Claire cut him off. "Don't you yell at me. And you're in no position to accuse me of anything. I only did it because my pride was hurt." "Oh, yes, your pride is above all else. My mother is right about you. A little princess with a queen's entitlement." Claire tried to walk past her husband. What she certainly hadn't expected were accusations directed at her. Although, it seemed, this was exactly what she had been aiming for at the beginning to make her husband jealous. But she wasn't prepared to listen to undeserved insults. "Mark, we need to have a serious talk. Just let me wash my face first." "What? Feeling dirty after cuddling with your boss?" Claire stopped and looked intently into her husband's face. "What did you just say?" she asked. "You heard me. Here, take a look at what I have." Mark pulled his phone from his pocket and turned the screen toward his wife. On the display was a photo of her and Michael Vance, at the moment when the man was giving her a supportive hug. "I don't understand. Who took this photo?" Claire asked, looking up at her husband. "What difference does it make who? Do you have any idea how I feel? My wife is acting like a cheap tramp, fooling around with other men. Don't you dare talk to me like that. I, for one, did nothing wrong, unlike you." "Oh, for one." Claire didn't even have time to process what happened. In an instant, a terrible pain shot through her face, and she, covering her eyes with her hands, pressed herself into the corner by the front door. Then the pain subsided a little, and the woman felt a hot liquid trickling through her fingers. Claire took her hands away from her face and saw blood. Since childhood, the sight of blood had sent her into a panic, and this time, it seemed to Claire that she was about to lose consciousness. However, her self-preservation instinct kicked in before she passed out. Right in front of her stood her attacker, and his expression was such that Claire, trembling all over, opened the door and ran out. She ran down the stairs, forgetting about the elevator. Somewhere around the third floor, her phone vibrated in her pocket. Mechanically, Claire took out her phone and, thinking it was Mark calling, was about to hang up, but the screen showed Michael's number. "Hello," Claire answered in a hoarse voice. "Claire, are you okay? It seems someone was following us. I received a photo taken on the riverbank where we were talking. I'll find out who it was. But for now, Claire, are you all right?" "Not really," Claire stammered. "Where are you now?" "At home." "Well, in the stairwell between floors. Stay there. I'm on my way." 15 minutes later, Michael Vance burst into the building. Taking the stairs two at a time, he reached the third floor, where Claire had been sitting on the steps all this time. The woman was afraid to leave her hiding spot, suspecting that Mark might have taken the elevator down and be looking for her in the yard. Gently examining Claire's bruised and bloody lips, the man asked curtly, "What's your apartment number?" Upon hearing the answer, he headed upstairs. He was gone for only about 5 minutes. He returned, rubbing his right hand, and without any explanation, drove Claire to his home. There, he examined Claire's face again and brought her a clean shirt. "Change. Your blouse is all bloody. I think we can do without medical attention, but if you want to go to the hospital to have this documented, I'll take you," said Michael. "No, that's not necessary. You were right. I got carried away playing the Great Avenger, and here's the result. Of course, I could never have imagined my husband was capable of something like this. By the way, someone also sent him a photo of us standing on the riverbank. I'll find out later who it could have been. Most likely someone from our office." "That's the ugliest part," Claire said with a sigh and added, "And I'm partly to blame for this too. My attempts to get closer to the boss probably didn't go unnoticed." Claire smiled and immediately winced in pain. "Let's save all discussions for later. You should rest now. Are you suggesting I stay here? I think that might make things worse. I don't think it makes a difference anymore. Besides, I'd like to keep an eye on you. Your husband might start looking for you among your mutual friends, and he definitely won't come here. Michael rubbed his hand again. Looking at this, Claire asked, "Did you get into a fight with him?" "No, just got even." "Now his face is busted up too," Michael said with sarcasm. Claire didn't even notice how she fell asleep in the separate bedroom Michael Vance had given her. In the morning, her face looked like that of a pitiful drunk. Claire didn't even know how she could face Michael, let alone go to work in such a state. "We'll just say our chief economist is sick and will be working remotely for a while," the owner of the apartment said cheerfully when Claire finally dared to enter the kitchen. "This is awful. Do you know how long this will take to heal? I look like a homeless person who's had a month-long bender." "Don't exaggerate. It's not that bad. You'll be as good as new in a week. By the way, I found out who owns the phone number from which that picture was sent to me." "Who? Is it one of our colleagues?" "Yes, Linda Collins. If I remember correctly, she works in accounting." "Yes, Linda has been with us for 3 years. I don't understand why she would do that." Michael shrugged. "Envy, pure malice, or something else. Women are complex creatures. Their actions are not always understandable." "Are you hinting at me?" Claire chuckled. "Oh, we're back to formalities?" "No, it's just, all of this is so new to me. Believe me. For me too. You're the first woman who has stayed the night here since my wife passed away." Claire looked at her boss with sadness and was about to start apologizing again, but Michael preemptively changed the subject. "I'll try to find out more about our envious accountant today, and you get some rest. The computer is connected to all the work programs. You can take care of all your pressing matters right from here." For the entire time it took for her face to heal, Claire stayed in her boss's apartment. She felt terribly uncomfortable taking advantage of his hospitality, especially considering how she had treated him. But she couldn't go to her parents or any of her friends looking like that. The fear of her husband, which had haunted Claire at first, gradually subsided, and she decided she had had enough of hiding. They would have to talk eventually, and there was no point in dragging it out. Michael Vance hadn't found out anything more about the reasons that prompted Linda Collins from accounting to take that photo and send it to both their boss and Claire's husband. Sometimes Claire felt that Michael was holding something back on the matter, but she couldn't get him to tell her what it was. Realizing that Michael Vance would be against her plan, Claire didn't say anything to him when she decided to meet with her husband. As a precaution, she went to Mark's workplace, having told him beforehand that she would be waiting for him at the building's entrance. When Claire arrived at the office by taxi at the appointed time, Mark was already waiting for her outside. "Hey," he said glumly. Mark looked so gaunt, and a bruise was still visible under his eye. "Claire, before you say everything you've prepared, I wanted to apologize. You know how jealous I am of you, and then I find out something like this. I just couldn't control myself. Do you think you can forgive me?" "Mark, forgiveness is out of the question. I'll explain why now. I should have done this a long time ago, and I'm partly to blame for pushing you to such actions." Claire took a deep breath. "Remember when you went to your mother's lake house and forgot your phone at home?" A flicker of fear crossed Mark's eyes, and Claire continued, "I accidentally found your phone under the pillow, and I read your last message, where you asked Chris Miller to wear that. Well, you know what? I had never experienced jealousy before, and in a way, I understand you now. It's an awful pain. So, I decided to make you feel the same thing and put on a sort of play. I never had anything with Michael Vance. He's a widower and still loves his wife." "You're lying. You've been living at his apartment for a week and working from his computer. Listen, how are you so well informed? Though it doesn't matter anymore. I'm not even interested in who that woman you were cheating on me with is. I only came to explain what's been happening lately." "And what now?" Mark asked, crossing his arms. "I think it's pretty clear. We can't be together anymore. That was clear to me the moment I held your phone in my hands. Claire, what if I told you that woman meant nothing to me? Just a meaningless fling to boost my ego. It wasn't easy watching guys stare at you all my life, and then Linda just threw herself at me. Who could resist? And we didn't even meet that often. I tried to be extremely careful." "Wait, what Linda? The one from our accounting department?" Claire's interest was piqued. Yeah, she works at the same company as you, Mark admitted reluctantly, having accidentally revealed his lover's name. And she used to go to the same college as us. By the way, she's very hurt that you don't remember her. Claire frowned, trying to figure out who he was talking about, but nothing came to mind. Apparently, in her younger years, this Linda had not aroused the slightest interest in Claire. Well, at least now I understand what made her follow me. Well, if I were you, I wouldn't lose touch with someone who's so into you, Claire said with a smile. Don't be sarcastic. I'm not planning on having a long-term relationship with her. She's not that interesting to me. That's for you to decide, Mark. I suggest we part ways amicably, without any extra drama, Claire began to say. But Mark interrupted her. Let's not rush into this. It's possible that time will help us get through this. Many couples face similar things and then live together until old age. Time won't change anything, and I don't want to live like this. You know what Michael Vance said? I loved my wife too much to cheat on her, and while I loved you, Mark, didn't notice anyone else around. All those other glances you talk about were just that other glances. That's the whole point. You were the only one for me, but I wasn't for you. So, I'm sorry, but for me, our separation is a done deal. 6 months later, after Mark had tried every possible way to win his wife back, they officially divorced. As far as Claire knew, her now ex-husband and the woman who was essentially the cause of all this had suddenly lost interest in each other. Mark spoke of his former mistress with sheer contempt, calling her foolish and arrogant. And Linda, before quitting the company where she had worked for the last few years, managed to say a lot to Claire. She called her an unprincipled predator and said that Claire takes all the best for herself, walking over people. It turned out that Linda had tried to win Mark's heart back in college, but Claire, who didn't even remember her existence, had stood in her way. When Linda got a job at the same firm where Claire held the position of senior economist, she decided to get her revenge. The woman already had a failed marriage behind her, and she secretly hoped not only to punish Claire, but also to take what she believed was rightfully hers, namely, Mark. Claire's rival had been banking on Claire suffering just as she had once suffered. But what Linda certainly hadn't expected was that Claire would once again outdo her, soaring even higher. No, of course, Linda wouldn't have dared to dream of the head of their division, Michael Vance, but that shameless Claire, on the other hand, the fact that she was married to Mark at the time didn't stop her. The most paradoxical thing in this situation was that Linda's love for Mark had also vanished somewhere. Either she had calmed down after quenching her thirst for revenge, or Mark, having become available, no longer seemed like such a valuable prize. And it also seemed to Claire that the reason for Linda's cooled feelings for her ex-husband was simple envy. The fact that Claire had supposedly outmaneuvered her again by winning the attention of a more worthy candidate for a husband drove Linda mad, and explaining to her that the affair she had gossiped about throughout the office was a complete fabrication was utterly useless. However, now, after these 6 months, all of this was in the past for Claire. The company's staff had long since calmed down about the rumors spread by the former accountant, and seeing that in reality, nothing but a professional and perhaps friendly relationship connected Miss Ashton and their director, Claire's colleagues had forgotten about it altogether. And just as Claire's life seemed to be finding a new meaning, and she had managed to overcome both her attachment to her ex-husband and her resentment towards him, the following happened. Claire was just leaving the grocery store, carrying a bag of products in front of her. Suddenly, her vision went dark, and Claire collapsed to the ground right next to her car. She regained consciousness, it seemed to her, almost immediately, but she couldn't remember how she ended up on a bench. Claire opened her eyes and saw an incredibly handsome man right in front of her. A face like that could only be seen on a TV screen or on the cover of a glossy magazine. In real life, Claire had never seen such perfection. Must be an angel, Claire thought aloud and tried to stand up. Easy there. It's better not to move right now. I've already called for an ambulance, so help is on the way, the angel said. Literally, at that same second, or perhaps time was flowing differently for Claire at that moment, an ambulance pulled up to the curb with its sirens wailing. 2 sturdy men in dark blue uniforms loaded Claire into the vehicle and slammed the doors shut. The angel, to her great regret, remained standing outside. The state of euphoria that had followed Claire all the way to the hospital passed as soon as she found herself in the emergency room. And when the doctor examined her and sent her for a brain scan, Claire immediately forgot about the handsome angel, too. Over the next 2 weeks, Claire underwent a series of other tests, and the result was rather bleak. It turned out that the headaches and dizziness, which had become part of her life right after the divorce, were not the result of exhaustion and stress. The cause was a tumor in her head, fortunately, benign, but still terrifying for both the patient and her relatives. Claire's mother cried constantly and couldn't pull herself together, and her father was mostly silent but worried no less. The young man who had helped Claire by calling the ambulance turned out to be a paramedic who worked for the same ambulance service. He just had a day off that day. Claire found this out by chance when she ran into him while coming for an appointment with her doctor. About a month had passed since their first meeting. By then, Claire had somewhat come to terms with the idea that a foreign and frightening guest was living in her head. "Hello," Claire greeted her savior and couldn't help but smile, remembering how she had mistaken him for an angel. The young man looked closely at her face and, apparently not remembering who she was, simply replied, "Hi, I wanted to thank you. I hate it when people talk to me so formally. Makes me feel like a senior citizen. Sorry, it's just that we haven't even been introduced." "I'm Paul," the young man said, breaking into a smile. "Oh, how many hearts have you broken, Paul?" Claire thought, unable to look away from his face. "And I'm Claire. You helped me when I fainted in the parking lot of the grocery store." "That's right. How could I forget? Listen, how are you? I heard they sent you to neurology." "Yeah, I have a brain tumor," Claire explained with a sigh. "Man, that sucks. You're so young," the guy said, running a hand through his hair nervously. "Well, it was nice to see you and express my gratitude. Not everyone is willing to help a stranger these days," Claire said, about to move on. "Wait," the young man stopped her. "Maybe we could get together sometime? Have lunch or dinner?" Claire was a bit surprised by the offer, but then she thought about it and agreed. Who could refuse to have dinner with such a handsome man? Besides, she had been sorely lacking positive emotions lately, and being with Paul felt so easy, as if there were no problems in the world at all. Upon closer acquaintance, Paul turned out to be a little different from what Claire had imagined. The guy was slightly shy, which didn't at all match his appearance and the ease with which he had asked her to dinner. After talking with him, Claire concluded that Paul was one of those people who act overly confident precisely because of their inner insecurity. This behavior is often seen in those who lack self-confidence or are ashamed of some physical flaw. There were no flaws in Paul's physique, but the young man considered himself a failure in life. He was a straight-A student in school, loved the exact sciences, and dreamed of getting into a prestigious university, choosing something related to genetic engineering, for example. However, he foolishly failed his entrance exams and began to drift through life in search of his own place under the sun. He had worked in a whole bunch of professions, and everywhere, things just didn't go right for him, as if bad luck was following the guy. "Now I want to go to medical school," Paul said, talking about his life. "I like it at the hospital. You feel responsible for what's truly important." "And what, in your opinion, is truly important?" Claire asked. And Paul answered, becoming very serious. "Human life. That's the most important thing, you see? We're all running somewhere, rushing as if a pack of hungry wolves is chasing us. And when we get to the edge, we start to slowly look around, and then we regret the time wasted on who knows what, and all the things we missed. In those moments, a person is more beautiful than ever. That's when they start to cherish their life. And it's very important that they continue to live. It's like a second chance, another life. And I really like helping people get that second chance." Claire stared at her companion. She understood exactly what he was talking about. In essence, she was that person who had stopped and was now observing her former life from the outside. After they found the tumor in her head, Claire had even started walking down the street much more slowly. Only now did she begin to notice how beautifully raindrops flowed down the window pane in her childhood bedroom. After the divorce, Claire had moved back in with her parents, probably because she didn't want to be alone at that time. And now she was terribly glad that she could have breakfast with her father every morning and chat with her mother in the evenings, who diligently hid her tears every time she looked at her daughter. Claire had even managed to completely forgive her ex-husband. Forgive him for real, not just in words. So Claire understood perfectly what her new acquaintance was talking about, and she was also very glad to have met him. At first, Claire didn't tell any of her colleagues about her sudden illness. She hated it when people started pitying her or, even worse, talking about her problems behind her back. However, soon Claire was scheduled for surgery, followed by a rehabilitation period. That was the best-case scenario, of course. The doctor didn't hide from Claire that the outcome of such surgical interventions could vary. Of course, he tried to give Claire, and especially her parents, hope, but in any case, he was obliged to explain all possible scenarios for the future. Deciding that she would have to inform her management about her illness anyway, Claire, mustering up her courage, went to Michael Vance's office. She had thought about it many times before that it wasn't right to hide her troubles from him, but it was unbearable to even think about how awkward the man who had become, in a way, a friend to her would feel. And the situation Claire found herself in would remind Michael of his wife's illness, and Claire didn't want to make him experience negative emotions again. She had already caused Michael Vance enough trouble with her past stunt. Claire had been in the director's office for about 10 minutes and still couldn't find the right words to tell him about her illness in a gentler way. "Claire, is something wrong?" Michael Vance asked, tired of watching her. "Oh, it's nothing too serious. Basically, I need to have surgery," the woman exhaled. "What kind of surgery?" Michael furrowed his dark brows and looked at Claire with a stern gaze. Then Claire, taking a deep breath, told him everything from the beginning. "So, the doctor says the surgery should help. I might need chemotherapy after, but it's too early to talk about that." "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Michael asked with disappointment. "I don't know," Claire shrugged. "I didn't want you to worry about me. It's better to have the surgery in a specialized clinic, in Boston or New York," the man said, becoming very serious. "My dad insists on that too, but I like the doctor who's currently treating me. And Paul says he's an excellent specialist." "Who is Paul?" "Paul, he's in the medical field too, works as a paramedic. Some great specialist." "Claire, this is no joke. Personal preferences have nothing to do with it. You need to take the best possible chances. I'll figure it out myself." "Okay." "No, not okay. You're too young and trusting. You're listening to the opinion of some loser when your health, and maybe even your life, is at stake." "Why a loser? Are you talking about Paul? A man who works as a paramedic doesn't seem very successful to me." "You're talking complete nonsense. By the way, Paul is much smarter and more well-read than many of my acquaintances. I believe there are plenty of good specialists in our city who can perform this damn surgery." "Claire, listen." "No, you listen. If you're such an expert on all this, why couldn't you help your wife?" The moment those words left her lips, Claire instantly regretted them. She couldn't understand what had come over her. It was as if she felt offended for her new acquaintance, Paul, and at the same time wanted to defend her own position of having the surgery in her hometown. But none of it was worth the torment that was now reflected in Michael's eyes, and it made Claire want to throw herself at his feet and beg for forgiveness. "You're right. Who am I to tell you what to do? I'm sorry. Don't worry about work. In your absence, we'll try not to let the company fall apart. I wish you a speedy recovery and hope to see you back at your duties soon." Michael said all this in a seemingly calm tone, but it only made Claire feel worse. The day of the scheduled surgery was rapidly approaching, and Claire was getting more and more nervous. She was no longer sure that she had done the right thing by not listening to the advice of Michael Vance and her father. Perhaps she really should have gone to a major city clinic and trusted more experienced specialists. The only one who lifted Claire's spirits during that time was Paul. In the company of her parents, seeing how much they worried about her, Claire only felt worse, and she had been actively avoiding Michael Vance's company since their last conversation. So it turned out that Claire spent most of her free time with Paul, trying with his help to drown out her growing fear of the upcoming surgery. Their relationship was still more like a friendship. Claire could see that Paul would have been happy to move to the next level in their relationship, but she wasn't ready for it. Maybe after the surgery, if everything goes well, Claire thought. Just before Claire was supposed to be admitted to the hospital, Paul suddenly disappeared. He didn't answer her calls or messages, which made Claire feel even more desolate. Her father drove her to the hospital. Her mother, meanwhile, was at home taking sedatives. The attending physician, seeing Claire's state, scolded her and told her to distract herself somehow, to read a favorite book or watch a movie. Following his advice, the woman actually found a book online by a little-known author she used to be obsessed with in her youth and became engrossed in reading. Curiously, the novel's main character, who had previously seemed quite old to her but was still sympathetic, was now practically her age. And he also somewhat resembled Michael Vance, which made Claire's heart feel even heavier. She decided she couldn't go into surgery without talking to Michael. Claire took out her phone and spent a few minutes gathering her thoughts. Then, after dialing her boss's number 3 times and getting no answer, Claire put the phone back on the nightstand and burst into bitter tears. Claire woke up to the quiet, rustling voice of her doctor. "Just came to check on you, and you didn't want to wake up," the doctor said. Claire wanted to say something, but her lips were dry. Then the woman opened her eyes wide and looked straight at him. "Good morning," the doctor said with a wide smile. "Is it still morning?" Claire asked, looking around. "That's just Dr. Evans's way of greeting everyone who wakes up from anesthesia," the nurse standing nearby chuckled. "Well, Claire, I can congratulate you. Of course, it's still early to say anything for sure, but I'm eager to tell you that the surgery was more than successful. It's one of those cases where there's every chance for a full recovery." "Really?" Claire asked in a hoarse voice. "Cross my heart," Dr. Evans replied, laughing. "Your relatives, by the way, already know, and we even managed to send them home. Well, not all of them. Your husband is still sitting in the waiting room, and I'm afraid he won't leave until he sees you." "My husband?" Claire asked, surprised. She hadn't seen Mark in a very long time, and she hadn't told him about her illness. Her parents must have decided to contact him in case something went wrong. To be honest, Claire really didn't want to see Mark, especially now, but she understood it would be wrong. Her ex-husband had probably spent a lot of time at the hospital and deserved to see that she was okay. "Can we see each other?" Claire asked, looking at the doctor pleadingly. "Are you sure you'll stay calm? It's better for you not to get agitated right now." Claire nodded carefully. 5 minutes later, the door to the room opened, and Claire, to her great surprise, saw Michael Vance. "Okay, you can talk, but not for long. Understood?" Dr. Evans said sternly, and left the room. As soon as the door closed behind him, Michael exhaled one word. "Claire," without taking his eyes off her face, he slowly approached and stopped beside her. "They told me my husband was in the waiting room," the woman said with an involuntary smile. "I had to lie. I'm sorry. I said you were my common-law wife and, as proof, showed them that photo where we're supposedly hugging by the river. Forgive me for that. It's okay. But why did you call yourself my husband? I couldn't stay away from you any longer. I used to be afraid of loving someone again, and when it happened, it was much scarier to lose you." "You love me?" Claire asked in a whisper. "More than life itself. But you don't have to worry about it. My feelings don't obligate you to anything. The most important thing for me is that you're okay." Michael fell silent. He looked as if he was scared of his own confession, and Claire looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. Her entire being was suddenly filled with a poignant tenderness. Under the influence of the overwhelming feelings, Claire reached out her hand to Michael and whispered, "Say it again, that you love me. I love you." Michael squeezed Claire's hand in his. "I love you very, very much." At that moment, Dr. Evans entered the room. "All right, you two, I'm very sorry, but it's time to say goodbye. The department head is coming, and I'll be in trouble if they find an unauthorized person in the room," the doctor said. Claire was discharged from the hospital 10 days later. Michael picked her up from the hospital, and she didn't return to her parents' house. Claire would laughingly say that she was used to healing her wounds in Michael's apartment, to which the man would also laughingly reply, strictly stating that this was the last time, and in the future, he wished to see Claire only completely healthy. Claire now awaited her healing with double the strength. She could sometimes feel the power of his love for her down to a tremor in her knees, and it made her heart sweetly flutter, responding in kind to this feeling. I will not let you down and I will get better, Claire thought to herself, looking into Michael's eyes. No one can say for sure why Claire fully recovered. Was it a successful surgery, or did the power of her will help her overcome her illness? Claire herself believes this. She had no right to be sick, and that was that. Who then would have become the mother of the two wonderful twin girls born 2 years after all those events? And who would have been such a happy wife, feeling the ever-growing love of her new husband every day? Feeling this love, Claire was no longer afraid of anything. She knew her loving husband would never betray her and would not leave her in sickness or in sorrow. He would not deceive her by running off to a mistress. He would not be afraid that, after getting up from the operating table, Claire might become different or even disabled. It was precisely such cowardly thoughts that had made her acquaintance, Paul, abandon her without support when she needed it most. Claire is confident that her husband and the father of her girls is ready to endure any trials for the sake of his family. Because for Michael, in sickness and in health, are not just words from a wedding vow. They are the personification of his love.